in the first 45 seconds of the interview, despite all the propriety, the social propriety, the being very, very careful, the being very, very introverted, and just, answering the questions as they're supposed to be, answering them as they're supposed to be answered factually and so on. Already, though, if you're looking at by 45 seconds, Mulligan has already begun to give away some hints that she's a dominant intuitive. Again, it would take a while for some stuff to accumulate. We'll go through the rest of it. But here's Ferguson doing the dominant anything like crazy, which is just checking things out. And that's part of what you INFJs love about us so much, is that you being so in tune with people and being able to read us when you're near us, as well as taking in all of those objectivist cues, but on a sort of subconscious level, processing them on a very deep, sophisticated and mostly subconscious level. You guys I know that you like us because you can see our creative thinking in action. You relate to it because you're very creative thinking as well. But you do have this kind of like, oh my God, because of your FE, how important that is to you as in your auxiliary function, and how kind of beholden to its rules of being proper and being very careful comparatively to the FI, and particularly FI is married to dominant NE. Then I know that you guys are you're kind of aghast, but you're also kind of amazed to see people like us going around flinging as we do and taking the risks that we do, because you think to yourselves like, oh my God, like I would never do that. I would never do that. But you can kind of sense our good intention, and you can sense that we, our warmth, and you can kind of feel us and where we're coming from, and how kind of simple we are in our motives and our drive for authenticity and all of that. So, it's hilarious. It's a hilarious combination, And you guys are usually pretty, if we're not too overwhelming and obnoxious, then, and if we're not making other people in the environs horribly uncomfortable, then you INFJs are usually right on board, because mentally you relate to us. And you find it quite refreshing and fun and bracing and a little bit scary, but in a good way, to be around our outrageousness, So you can see this already happening right away as soon as they start talking, when he sits down. And of course, his reputation will have preceded him too in her mind. She's no dummy. She would have seen it. She knows what's going on. So there she is. So you can tell she's enjoying his playfulness, and he's just chucking that stuff out there. You can see her reacting to it. First of all, you can tell she's a Dom N, I think, because she's not thrown by what he's doing. So although she herself is very proper and not saying anything outrageous, not saying anything risky, not offending, being very careful not to offend, but also still be very engaging and very gracious, which is what FE is all about and very, very good at. The fact that she is responding positively to his outrageous stuff, as opposed to being flustered by it or just kind of puzzled by it, or, she's getting it. She's getting it and she's enjoying it. And you can see she's not really fleshing. That's what's interesting, right? Like, she's quite shy. You can tell she's very, very introverted. She's feeling very self-conscious and uncomfortable, but she's trying not to make everybody else uncomfortable. She's trying to mask that discomfort, and she is, she's following him. She's every bit as quick as he is with all of this, and she thinks it's funny, and she's not embarrassed by it. I mean, she's kind of looking, as INFJs will, to an ENTP or an ENFP. You'll just kind of sit back and, quietly inside your little theater of your minds and just kind of watch the show and just sort of be like, wow, look at you, But you won't object to it. You won't, you're holding your own and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and behind your mask, and, but you're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy yourself, and you're getting it. And she's not embarrassed by what he's saying. She totally understands what he's saying. Here's where I can tell that her NI is peeking out. And it will be through, again, the show function is the auxiliary function for any introvert. So her FE is what's very obviously out there. But the NI comes out in what she says. So maybe that's I'm thinking aloud here, but maybe that's a little tip, a little rule of thumb, is that when you know you're dealing with an introvert, if you're trying to figure out what their dominant function is, which of course you are, because, well, it's most influential in a person's personality. And also, once you know what that is, then you can deduce all the rest of it. You can deduce all the rest of the type, really. If you know the auxiliary function and you know the dominant function, then you automatically will be able to know the others without even asking any other questions, if you got those right. So, yeah, so you want to do that. So if you can discern that it's an introvert you're dealing with, and once you've ascertained what the show function is, the auxiliary function, then the next thing is to look. Then you need to be very objectivist then, very often, to determine the dominant function, because the workings of the dominant function will be given away in a non-obvious way because they're introverted. So NI, in this case, where the NI comes out, and it comes out almost right away, now that I'm studying it, but I also know from all my social experience and my acumen with that this really is reliable, what I'm saying. So when she makes the comment, my hair, they start talking about her hair as soon as she sits down. And of course, Craig Ferguson is just doing the usual ENFP, totally improvisational, out of left field. Now we're talking about this. Oh, now we're talking about this. Oh, now we're talking about this. Like with just no inhibition at all, just all over the place. Scattered. And she's just sort of letting him take the lead with that, as, the role would have her do. And again, FE is extremely in any prominence is extremely conscious, again, without even trying, is extremely conscious of the social contracts that are involved on the micro level and on the macro level. So someone with strong FE is going to be very observant of those social contracts, and they're going to hold up their end of the bargain. Unless the other gives them a great leave, and unless they give themselves a great leave to go apart, part ways with that, which usually is going to take a great deal, particularly in formal setting, and feeling really comfortable and feeling like being informal with someone, being more intimate with someone. So that could take a while with an introvert, especially a feeling one. So, an emotionally sensitive one. Anyway, so back to Mulligan and her NI and how it's showing. When she says, my hair, it's a bit of a sore topic at the moment. Then when she says, blah, 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 this is why I got it cut short. It's because I thought it would advance my career. Then when she says, it's kind of mullety. And when she observes of Ferguson, when he's making fun of his own hair and how his producers had asked, basically compelled him to get it dyed when he started the show. And she chucks in the observation, oh, you're strong, you have strong blue eyes. Now, I don't know if you're getting that right away because I just barfed at those details. But if you look at each of those parts of those sentences in their proper context, those are all framing of things in a big picture way. All of those are departures from the tiny little view, the S view, the very concrete orientated, just here and now, just the facts, ma'am, just what can be known through the five senses. All of those little things that she said mean that she is automatically in her mind framing things in a big picture. She's putting all the little details of the anecdotes in a larger understanding, a zoomed out understanding of what it means. So when she says, oh, my hair is it takes her about 38 seconds to start jumping into Dom intuitive business by saying, oh, my hair. She makes the association with her getting her hair cut short, with it being part of a larger story of like, oh, it's a bit of a sore topic. She just takes it, branches it right out. Whoop! That's very dominant N of her to do that. Branches it out to a larger thing. Then she says, I did this and this, and, they asked me to do this, and then I did this, and then blah, 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 blah. That's all what censors could say as well. Censor paying attention, telling a story, and going through the points in a linear fashion and talking about the concrete details. But then, again, it's another 10 seconds before she jumps off into a larger picture, making of associations, making of a larger meaning of the details. So she says, offers up quite naturally. I said, yes, you can cut my hair because I thought it might help my career. So again, that's if you think about it, if you pay attention to that, that's a real extenuation of going from, that's quite a drift from just sticking to the facts of the bare bones of the story. The question was, how did your hair come to be cut, basically. She's strayed way away from that into a much larger meaning as to the why. What is the meaning for agreeing to have her hair cut for the role? And she was thinking of some long range objective, and even as introverted and shy and private and proper as she is as a Dom NI with FE in effect, as an ingenue, on display in a very public forum that must be racking her nerves like crazy, even then her dominant N is so strong that she gives that away. So there's that. Then the next thing she says, he starts joking about how he had to have his, how terrible he looked when he had his job as a performer, required that he get his hair dyed. And she just jumps in and offers, you have such strong blue eyes. Now, the fact that she does that without any preamble, she's doing two things that are very dominant intuitive in that moment. Three things. She is perceiving what it is that she's sort of getting a preview with her own imagination of why that hair would be such a terrible idea. She's using her imagination, very dominant N of her. She's using her big imagination to anticipate what the punchline is going to be as to why, because she knows that Ferguson is about to go into a joke about having his hair dyed. The whole way he's setting it up in this very clowny way of like, I had my hair dyed too, and he leans way in to her like that. So she knows something funny is coming, and she anticipates with her imagination what the punchline is of him looking so weird. And rather than, and she makes a leap, and she makes the observation that it's the contrast between his strong blue eyes, as she says, and this unnaturally dark hair that would be so jarring and weird to look at. But she's unlike a censor, very unlike a censor, she's not taking this matter of fact, let's explain all the steps along the path to how we got to this idea way of doing things. She's just making that leap to, of course, and she's leaving the middle part out because she knows he's going to get it, right? She knows she's in the presence of another, not just another N, but someone who's a dominant N, although she's, of course, not, I'm sure she's not thinking of it in those terms, but I mean, she's naturally responding to that in her dominant N way. So she's just cutting right to the end of the line. Like there's no need to, with two dominant N's, there's no need to go. And then I thought because that's why S's bore the shit out of us, because they actually need to go and then this and then this and then this and then this. Whereas we just go from A to K a lot of the time. And we don't need to explain the middle part because that's not even the point as far as we're concerned. That's not the point at all. That's not what we're really interested in. So she just dispenses with that too. Then he makes some joke about, about her short, and then she says, it's kind of mullety about her new short hairdo. And again, that's making an association. That's taking, the facts are, it's a shorter haircut. It is a short woman's haircut. And in fact, it's quite a proper and conservative short woman's haircut. But she's kind of making a joke in a creative thinking way. And she's making reference, again, to a much larger picture of like the big book of all the different hairstyles one can have. And she knows that mullets are kind of funny, and she's being self-deprecating and kind of charming and gracious and whatever. And she's, talking about her own, sort of framing in a humorous way, her own objection to her new hairdo. When he makes the joke about, commenting on her hair, he just throws this out there again because he knows on an unconscious level, I guess. The processing is all happening so quickly, and I don't even know if he knows about the MBTI, so I don't think he's framing it in his own mind. The interaction is such, he's just going on his instinct, but he throws it out there. Like about her new hairdo. Is it like for a sci-fi movie or something like that? And again, what the audience gets, what we all get, who think it's funny, is that women, it's a more modern woman, a modern woman's haircut is a short haircut, or not that it's the only one, but it by definition is a very modern hairdo, historically speaking, for a female. So. So that's why very often there are a lot of short-haired women in sci-fi, and that's what he's making a joke about. And she immediately laughs. But here's the thing that I can draw on from my own experience talking with INFJs and INTJs, is that her reaction is, you can tell again, she likes it. She's enjoying this humor and she really gets it. And one of the ways you can tell that she really gets it is that she reacts really positively. She laughs, and and each time she laughs, she loosens up just a tiny bit more, in his presence and in this situation. But one way you can tell she's a fellow dominant intuitive and not a sensor, and nor someone with the N preference, but in a much lower position in the cognitive function stack, is that she's not overly impressed with such a thing. And this is something that I can gauge when I'm in conversation with an INFJ or an INTJ. What they are when I joke around is they're not that I'm any Craig Ferguson, but like my silly stuff. What I can gather from interacting with them on the meta level is that they are delighted by my irreverence and the creative thinking that I'm putting out on display. But they're not it's not like they're super impressed by it, because they can do it too. For them, it's just like, what it is more of a delight of like, I see, you're like me this way. And so they really enjoy it. But what someone who doesn't share our dominant N preference, what they're much more likely to do, especially a sensor and especially an SJ, is they might think it's funny, but if they're an SJ, they're not going to think it's as funny as a fellow N. And if they're an N who has it in a lower position in the cognitive function stack, what they will be more likely to do is go, like you'll get an even bigger reaction, because they're kind of shocked by the out of left field creativity of what the dominant NE person has just said. Whereas a dominant NI person, they won't have that same shocked reaction, because their mind is working the same way in terms of this conversational stuff and this playfulness, with this playing with ideas and playing with ideas and making really huge intuitive leaps and being very, very creative thinking. So what I predict, I'm going to stop here, but I've forgotten what happens in the rest of this interview, but if it's like all the other interactions I've ever had with with the NI dominance, the INFJs and the INTJs, is I will just keep going in that vein. I know I'm in the groove with them, and I know it's being well received. And furthermore, they're volleying these little hints back to me that they can totally keep up with all that. And they're gonna be checking in like much more modest, much more proper in the beginning, much more reserved. But they're gonna be like letting me have a little peek at the fact that they're just as creative thinking as I am, and they're gonna delight me back by putting these odd and probably much more, concise and structured and proper and tidy and properly formed, but they're going to be lobbing those little tidbits back to me to delight me, and we play with each other. And what then will tend to happen in the conversation, if we can keep talking to each other for 15 minutes or whatever it is, as the interaction goes on longer, what happens is usually the INFJ or the INTJ, they loosen up a little more and a little more as we go along, and then they let more of themselves out to play with me where I can see it, and it just gets more and more fun. And of course, if a friendship develops out of many of those, then they get less and less inhibited, and the INFJ begins to take, and the INTJ will take risks. They're just blunt, and they're not nearly as emotionally sensitive. But the INFJs will usually, it takes a while for them to stop being goody-goodies around me and to start teasing me back and taking risks like that. They need to be really sure that it's okay, because they need to honor their FE. They need to observe their FE rules and their roles. So they need to feel, I take it as a wonderful new development in my relationship with an INFJ when they start to tease me back and they start to be more improper and more irreverent in a more obvious way with me, because that means we've really moved along, and it's just so much fun. And I knew it was in there anyway, and it's just so fun when they can let it out and play with me like that. So and I'm also I'm very happy about what that means, because an INFJ won't do that until they feel really comfortable with you, until they trust you to a good extent. So it's just delightful. It's just so nice.